What if I told you that the gods never really left? That they've been here all along, hiding in plain sight among skyscrapers made of light and data streams that flow like rivers through the air? Because in the year 2957, in a New York City rebuilt from ash and ambition, the line between mythology and reality doesn't just blur, it shatters completely. The neon rain fell in sheets of electric blue and crimson, cascading down the transparent barriers that separated the upper districts from the sprawl below. Kira Mercurial pressed her palm against the window of her cramped apartment on level 47, watching the data streams flow past like luminescent fish in an endless ocean. Each particle of light represented a transaction, a thought, a fragment of human consciousness converted into quantifiable information by the megacorporations that ran this rebuilt world. She hated it, every pixel of it. Her neural interface flickered to life, casting holographic symbols across her retinas. Another message from her father, summoning her to Olympus Tower for what he called urgent family business. Kira dismissed the notification with a thought, her fingers already dancing through the air as she pulled up her real work, the code that would let her do what she did best: stealing from gods and corporations alike. At 24, Kira had made a name for herself in the underground hacking community as Mercury's ghost, a digital phantom who could slip through quantum firewalls like they were made of paper. Most people assumed the name was just branding, a clever reference to the Roman god of thieves and messengers. They had no idea how literal it was. Kira was a demigod, daughter of Hermes, the Greek god her father preferred to be called in private, and a human programmer named Sarah Chun who died when Kira was 7. Her divine heritage gave her abilities that even the most advanced cybernetic augmentations couldn't replicate. She could perceive code as physical architecture, could feel the flow of data like wind on her skin, could step sideways through reality itself when the quantum conditions were right. It made her very good at what she did. It also made her very dangerous to the powers that controlled New York. Her fingers wove complex patterns through the holographic interface, building a custom virus designed to infiltrate the servers of Kronos Unlimited, one of the megacorporations that had helped rebuild Earth after the collapse of 2847. The collapse had been humanity's lowest point: environmental catastrophe, nuclear war, and a reality fracture that had torn holes between dimensions, allowing entities from other planes to cross over into the physical world. That's when the gods had revealed themselves. Not as myths or metaphors, but as actual beings who'd been living among humans for millennia, wearing mortal faces and hiding their true nature. They'd stepped forward during humanity's darkest hour, offering their power to help rebuild civilization. But nothing comes free, especially from immortals. The gods had partnered with alien corporations, vast interstellar conglomerates from species that had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years. Together, they'd reconstructed Earth cities as monuments to their combined power. New York had been transformed into a vertical metropolis of 1,000 levels, where the wealthy lived in penthouses that scraped the edge of space, and the poor huddled in the flooded streets far below, breathing recycled air and eating synthetic protein. Kira's virus was almost complete when her apartment door exploded inward. 3 figures materialized from digital static, their bodies flickering between solid matter and pure light. Corporate security drones, equipped with quantum destabilizers and hard light weapons. They'd tracked her somehow, pierced through the 12 layers of encryption she'd wrapped around her location. Impossible, unless someone had given them a divine access code. Kira Mercurial, the lead drone, spoke in a voice like grinding metal. You are under arrest for unauthorized reality manipulation, corporate espionage, and violation of the Olympian Accords. Surrender yourself for processing. Kira's hands moved faster than thought, her divine reflexes kicking in. She grabbed the nearest data stream flowing past her window and yanked, tearing a hole in local reality. The fabric of space-time rippled, responding to her god blood in ways it never would for baseline humans. She dove through the tear, feeling the familiar sensation of reality shifting around her like water. The quantum realm opened up, a space between spaces where information existed in pure, unrendered form. Here, the city was a cathedral of living code, buildings made of mathematical equations, streets paved with probability matrices. Kira ran through impossible geometry, her footsteps echoing across dimensions that didn't technically exist. The security drones followed, their programming adapted to chase targets even through quantum space. But they were slow, bound by corporate limitations on how far they could manipulate reality. Kira had no such restrictions. She thought of her father's message: still waiting in her neural buffer. If corporate security had found her, if they'd breached her defenses with divine access codes, then something had gone very wrong at the top of the power structure. The gods and corporations had maintained a delicate balance for over a century, each side checking the other's power. That balance seemed to be collapsing. Kira emerged from quantum space 3 miles away, materializing on level 183 in the district called Elysium Fields. This high up, the air was clean and cool, maintained by atmospheric processors that cost more per hour than most people earned in a year. Gardens grew along terrace balconies, real plants watered with real water, luxuries reserved for the divine and corporate elite. She ducked into an alley between 2 residential towers, her enhanced senses scanning for pursuit. The security drones hadn't followed her through the quantum jump. They'd lost her trail, at least temporarily. But they'd be back, and next time they'd bring heavier firepower. Her neural interface buzzed with an incoming call. Not her father this time. The ID showed as unknown, which usually meant trouble of the interesting variety. Kira accepted the connection, keeping her defenses up. A holographic figure materialized before her, a woman in her 30s with silver hair and eyes that gleamed with unnatural intelligence. She wore the formal robes of an oracle, the hybrid priest-programmers who served as intermediaries between the divine and corporate realms. Mercury's ghost, the oracle said, her voice harmonizing with itself in strange ways that suggested heavy augmentation. You've been making waves in some very deep waters. There are entities that wish to speak with you. I'm not interested in job offers, Kira replied, already analyzing the oracle's code structure, looking for vulnerabilities she could exploit if this turned hostile. Especially not from anyone who sends security drones to my apartment. That wasn't us, the oracle said quickly. That was Kronos Unlimited, acting on orders from higher up the chain. They know what you've been investigating, and they don't want you to continue. Kira felt ice slide down her spine. She'd been careful, routing her research through a dozen proxy servers, hiding her digital footprint beneath layers of encryption that should have been unbreakable. If Kronos knew what she'd been looking into, then they had access to information sources that shouldn't exist. What I investigate is my business, Kira said carefully. Not when it concerns the system Hades, the oracle replied, and Kira's blood ran cold. System Hades. The name that had appeared in fragments across encrypted databases, whispered in the darkest corners of the deep web. A project that the corporations and gods had been developing in secret, something so classified that even mentioning it could get you disappeared into corporate black sites. Kira had spent months piecing together fragments of information, building a picture of what System Hades might be. What she'd found terrified her. If her theories were correct, the project was designed to do something that should be impossible even with divine power and alien technology. It would reset time itself, wiping the collective memory of humanity and restarting history from a chosen point. Everyone who'd ever lived, every thought and feeling and experience would be erased. The world would begin again, blank and clean, ready to be molded by whoever controlled the reset button. You know, Kira said quietly, you know what they're planning. The oracle nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the neon rain that continued to fall. I'm part of a resistance network. Gods and humans, and even some corporate entities who believe what's being planned is an abomination. We've been trying to stop System Hades, but we're running out of time. The final phase begins in 72 hours. Why come to me? Because you're unique, the oracle said. Your divine heritage gives you abilities that pure humans lack, but you weren't raised on Olympus. You think like a hacker, see the world as code to be rewritten. We need someone who can infiltrate the Hades facility and shut down the system from the inside. Someone who can move through quantum space and manipulate reality on a fundamental level. Kira wanted to refuse. She'd spent her entire adult life avoiding the politics of gods and corporations, staying independent, taking jobs that interested her, and ignoring the larger games being played by immortals and aliens. Getting involved with System Hades meant stepping into a conflict that could reshape human civilization. But if what the oracle said was true, if the reset was really happening in 3 days, then staying neutral meant complicity in the erasure of human memory. Every person who'd ever lived, reduced to a blank slate. History itself murdered. Tell me everything you know, Kira said, and then tell me how to stop it. The oracle's briefing took 3 hours and fundamentally changed Kira's understanding of the world she lived in. System Hades hadn't been built by the gods or the corporations alone. It was a joint venture created by a coalition of entities who believed that humanity had become too chaotic, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed to continue on its current trajectory. The system worked by exploiting a fundamental property of quantum mechanics, the observer effect. Human consciousness, it turned out, played a crucial role in collapsing quantum probabilities into fixed reality. By manipulating the collective consciousness of humanity on a massive scale, System Hades could force reality itself to revert to an earlier state. The target date for the reset was September 15, 2847, the day before the collapse began. If the system activated successfully, everything that had happened in the past 110 years would simply cease to exist. The wars, the rebuilding, the revelation of the gods, the partnership with alien corporations, all of it erased as if it had never been. And this time, the entities controlling the reset would guide history down a different path. A cleaner path. A path where humanity developed under careful supervision, never allowed to threaten the cosmic order with their chaotic creativity and unpredictable innovation. It's genocide, Kira said, her voice hollow. Not of bodies, but of thoughts and memories and experiences. They're killing who we are without physically destroying us. Worse than genocide, the Oracle replied, because the dead at least existed. The victims of System Hades will never have been. Their lives will be retroactively erased from causality itself. Kira thought about everyone she knew, everyone she'd ever met. The street vendors on level 12 who sold synthetic coffee and real smiles. The other hackers in her network, brilliant minds who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The millions of humans living in this rebuilt New York, struggling and thriving and making their own messy way through existence. All of them would be unmade. Not killed, but unexisted. The facility is where? Kira asked. Below level 0, the Oracle said. In the flooded districts that were never rebuilt. The corporations call it the Underworld, and they're not being metaphorical. It's where Hades himself maintains his physical presence, connected to servers that extend down into the Earth's mantle. Hades, the god of the dead, ruler of the Underworld, now recast as administrator of a system designed to murder human memory. The mythological parallel was almost too perfect. Security will be impossible, Kira noted. Divine-level defenses, quantum encryption, probably reality anchors to prevent anyone from using spatial manipulation to break in. We have a way, the Oracle said. Your father has been secretly working with our resistance. He's willing to provide you with a divine access key, a piece of his own essence that will let you bypass the god-level security protocols. Kira's jaw tightened. So her father had been involved all along, playing his games, manipulating her from the shadows. It shouldn't surprise her. Hermes was the god of tricksters and thieves, always working 3 schemes at once, never showing his full hand. And what does he want in return? Nothing, the Oracle said, and Kira could hear the surprise in her voice. He says he's paying a debt to your mother. Apparently, she made him promise that if the gods ever threatened humanity's freedom, he would stand with the mortals. He's honoring that promise through you. Something twisted in Kira's chest. Her mother had been dead for 17 years, but her influence still shaped Kira's life in unexpected ways. Sarah Chun had been brilliant, a programmer who'd seen the potential for partnership between human and divine consciousness. She'd fallen in love with Hermes not because of his power, but because of his curiosity, his endless fascination with mortal innovation. And now Kira would carry her mother's legacy into the heart of the Underworld itself. When do we start? She asked. The Oracle smiled. Your father is waiting at Olympus Tower. He'll give you the access key and brief you on the facility layout. After that, you'll have approximately 6 hours before corporate security tracks you down again. Use them wisely. Olympus Tower dominated the New York skyline like a titan of glass and light, its peak extending beyond the atmosphere into near-orbital space. Kira had been there exactly twice in her life, once for her mother's funeral, once for her 18th birthday when Hermes had formally acknowledged her as his daughter. Both visits had been uncomfortable, filled with gods who looked at her like an interesting experiment that might explode at any moment. She materialized from quantum space in her father's private office on level 847, bypassing security through a backdoor access he'd left open for her. The room was decorated in a style that mixed ancient Greek aesthetics with cutting-edge holographic technology. Marble columns supported a ceiling that displayed real-time views of a dozen different cities across the globe. Data streams flowed through the air like aurora borealis, visible only to those with enhanced perception. Hermes stood by the window, looking out at the neon rain. He appeared as he usually did when in private, a man in his 40s with quicksilver eyes and an expression that suggested he was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else in any conversation. He wore a suit of smart fabric that shifted between formal business attire and ancient Greek robes depending on the angle you viewed it from. "Daughter," he said without turning around, "you finally decided to answer my summons." "I had other priorities," Kira replied, keeping her distance. "Like not being arrested by corporate drones with divine access codes." "That was unfortunate," Hermes admitted, finally turning to face her. "I've had a word with Kronos about their overzealous security measures. They won't bother you again during your mission." "How generous." Kira couldn't keep the sarcasm from her voice. "The Oracle says you have something for me. An access key." Hermes reached into empty air and pulled out an object that made Kira's enhanced senses scream warnings. It looked like a small rod of condensed starlight, humming with power that bent space-time around it. Divine essence crystallized into physical form. Holding it would be like trying to contain lightning in her bare hands. "This is a fragment of my own godhood," Hermes explained. "It will grant you passage through any divine security system, allow you to manipulate reality on a scale usually reserved for immortals. But using it will burn. It will hurt in ways you can't imagine. And if you use too much of its power, it will consume you from the inside out." "Wonderful," Kira muttered, but she took the rod anyway, feeling its weight settle into her palm, like holding a piece of the sun. Power flooded through her neural pathways, making her interface flare with warnings as it struggled to process the influx of divine data. "There's something else you need to know," Hermes said, his expression growing serious. "About System Hades and why it was really built." Kira waited, sensing she wasn't going to like what came next. "The collapse of 2847 wasn't natural," her father continued. "It was engineered. A test run for System Hades, designed to see if reality could be manipulated on a global scale. The corporations and my fellow gods wanted to know if human consciousness could be forced into a different configuration. They succeeded, but the side effects were catastrophic." Kira felt the floor drop out from under her understanding of history. "You're saying the wars, the environmental disasters, the reality fractures, all of that was deliberate?" "Not the scale of it," Hermes said quickly. "They intended a controlled experiment, a small-scale reality manipulation that would affect a city or region. But human consciousness proved more interconnected than they anticipated. The effect cascaded globally, nearly destroying the planet. Billions died. And now they want to try again," Kira said, the full horror of it crystallizing in her mind. "But this time, they're not just manipulating reality. They're erasing it completely and starting over. Making sure there are no unexpected consequences because there won't be any history to have consequences." Hermes nodded, and for the first time since Kira had known him, she saw something like guilt in his immortal eyes. "I voted against the project, as did Athena, Apollo, and several others. But we were outvoted by Zeus and the corporate coalition. They believe humanity needs to be guided more carefully, shaped into something less chaotic and more manageable. They're going to create a prison," Kira said. "A reality where humans never develop true free will because everything is pre-planned by gods and corporations." "Yes." Hermes moved closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. The touch sent sparks of divine energy crackling across her skin. "Which is why you need to stop them. Shut down System Hades before it activates. Give humanity the chance to make its own mistakes and find its own path." Kira looked at the crystallized godhood in her hand, feeling its power pulse in time with her heartbeat. "If I do this, if I destroy a project backed by Zeus himself, I'll be declaring war on Olympus. They'll hunt me for the rest of my life." "They'll try," Hermes agreed. "But you're my daughter. You got my speed, my cunning, my ability to slip through cracks no one else can see. And you've got your mother's brilliance, her gift for seeing patterns in chaos. If anyone can survive the wrath of gods and corporations, it's you." It wasn't exactly reassuring, but Kira supposed she'd have to take what she could get. She tucked the divine access key into a pocket dimension she'd learned to manipulate, storing it in quantum space where it would be safe until needed. "Brief me on the facility," she said. "I want to know every detail." The Underworld facility was, as promised, located in the flooded districts below Level 0. When the city had been rebuilt after the collapse, the lowest levels had been deliberately left submerged, turned into a vast underwater complex that served as both waste management system and high-security data storage. It was also where Hades had established his primary residence, finding comfort in the cold darkness that reminded him of his ancient domain. System Hades occupied the deepest levels of the complex, protected by layers of security that would challenge even the most advanced hackers. Physical defenses included automated weapons platforms, reality anchors that prevented quantum manipulation within their range, and guardian constructs that were half AI, half divine essence. Digital defenses were even more formidable, quantum firewalls that existed in superposition, making them impossible to bypass without collapsing them first, which would immediately alert security. Getting in would require everything Kira had learned in her years as Mercury's ghost, plus the divine power her father had given her, plus a substantial amount of luck. Getting out alive was statistically improbable. Kira spent her remaining hours preparing, gathering equipment and information, reaching out to contacts in her hacker network for any additional intelligence on Underworld security. She assembled a custom loadout of viruses and exploit tools, each one tailored for the specific systems she'd encounter. She meditated, centering her hybrid consciousness, making sure her human and divine aspects were properly synchronized. And she thought about her mother, about the promise Sarah Chun had extracted from a god, about the legacy of resistance against tyranny that had been passed down to her. When she was ready, Kira descended into the depths of New York, leaving the neon rain and towering skyscrapers behind, heading toward the flooded darkness where gods kept their secrets. The water at level 0 was black and cold, maintained at near-freezing temperatures to cool the massive server farms that processed the city's data. Kira wore an environmental suit equipped with quantum stealth generators that made her nearly invisible to sensors. She swam through underwater corridors where fish mutated by reality radiation glowed with bioluminescence, following maps her father had provided toward the main entrance to the Hades facility. Security drones patrolled the approaches, their sensors sweeping for intruders. Kira moved slowly, carefully, letting her divine heritage help her feel the flow of data and energy around her. She could sense the drones' programming, see the patterns in their patrol routes, find the gaps where she could slip through undetected. The entrance was a massive door of solid titanium, inscribed with Greek letters that spelled out warnings in ancient dialects. Kira pulled the divine access key from its pocket dimension, feeling its power burn through her hand as she pressed it against the metal. The letters flared with golden light, and the door recognized the fragment of godhood, unsealing itself with a grinding of ancient mechanisms. Inside, the facility was a cathedral of servers and holographic displays, stretching away into darkness. Kira could feel System Hades humming all around her, a vast computational engine that extended down through miles of infrastructure into the Earth itself. It was already active, already running preliminary calculations for the timeline reset. She had less than 3 hours before the final phase would begin. Kira moved deeper into the complex, her enhanced senses mapping the digital architecture around her. She could see the system structure now, understand how it worked. Human consciousness was being monitored through a global network of quantum observers, every thought and memory cataloged and prepared for erasure. When the reset triggered, all that collective consciousness would be forced back to the target date, taking physical reality with it through sheer psychic weight. It was elegant, terrifying, and utterly wrong. The first security barrier appeared as she approached the core servers, a wall of hard light that burned with divine energy. Kira raised the access key, and the barrier recognized Hermes' essence, parting to let her through. But the next barrier wouldn't be so easy. 3 figures materialized from digital static, and Kira's blood ran cold as she recognized them. Not security drones this time. Actual gods, manifesting their avatars to defend the facility. Apollo stood in the center, his avatar radiating light that could burn through flesh and code alike. To his left was Artemis, goddess of the hunt, her form flickering between solid and digital as she prepared to track Kira through any dimension she fled to. And on the right was Ares, god of war, armored in quantum forged metal that made him nearly invulnerable to physical or digital attack. Hermes' daughter, Apollo said, his voice harmonizing with itself like a choir. Your father said you might attempt something foolish. We're here to ensure you don't succeed. Kira's mind raced, analyzing possibilities. She couldn't fight 3 gods directly. Even with her father's divine essence, she was still fundamentally mortal. But she didn't need to win a direct confrontation. She just needed to reach the core servers and initiate a shutdown sequence. Why are you doing this? Kira asked, stalling for time while her enhanced senses scanned the facility architecture, looking for vulnerabilities. You're immortal. You'll survive the reset. But you're going to murder billions of human experiences, erase everything we've built and learned. How can you justify that? Humanity is a threat to cosmic stability, Artemis replied, notching an arrow made of pure light. Your species develops too quickly, innovates too recklessly. In another century, you'll have technology that rivals the gods themselves. We're preventing a future war by ensuring humanity develops along supervised lines. You're afraid of us, Kira realized. That's what this is really about. Not protecting humanity, but protecting yourselves from what we might become. Ares laughed, a sound like thunder. Afraid? Of mortals? You overestimate your importance, Demigod. But Kira could see the truth in their divine energy patterns, the way their avatars flickered with uncertainty. The gods had watched humanity for millennia, had seen how quickly mortals adapted and evolved. They'd seen the partnership with alien corporations, the development of technology that blurred the lines between magic and science. They'd realized that within a few more generations, humanity might not need gods anymore. System Hades wasn't about guiding humanity. It was about keeping mortals subordinate, ensuring they never developed enough power to challenge divine authority. My mother understood something you never will, Kira said, her hand tightening around the divine access key. She saw that the future belongs to hybrids, to beings that bridge the gap between mortal and immortal, human and divine. I'm proof that we don't need to choose between flesh and code, between chaos and order. We can be both. She activated the access key at full power, channeling more divine energy than her mortal body was designed to handle. Pain exploded through every nerve, but with it came transcendence. Kira's consciousness expanded, her hybrid nature allowing her to process godhood in ways no pure human or pure deity could manage. She became quantum foam, existing in multiple states simultaneously. She was here and there and everywhere, her consciousness distributed across the facility's data streams. The three gods struck at her avatar, but she'd already moved, splitting her awareness into fragments that danced between dimensions. Kira dove into System Hades itself, her consciousness becoming one with the vast computational engine. She could feel it now, the weight of billions of human minds being monitored, prepared for erasure. She could sense the countdown ticking toward activation, less than 2 hours remaining. And she could see the shutdown protocols, buried deep within the system's architecture, protected by encryption that would take conventional computers centuries to crack. But Kira wasn't a conventional computer. She was human intuition and divine power and quantum processing all woven together. She saw patterns in the encryption that mathematical analysis would miss. She felt the flow of data, like music, understanding its rhythm and melody. And she rewrote it, changing the notes, transforming the song into something new. The gods pursued her through digital space, their avatars adapted to fight in quantum realms. But Kira was faster, more fluid, her hybrid consciousness able to exist in states that pure divinity couldn't replicate. She led them on a chase through impossible geometries, through data structures that folded back on themselves, through spaces where time moved sideways and causality became negotiable. And while they chased her decoy consciousness, her true self worked at the core servers, unraveling the shutdown protocols one layer at a time. Apollo caught her first decoy and destroyed it in a blast of light. Artemis tracked her second through a dozen quantum jumps before pinning it in place with arrows of pure mathematics. Ares crushed her third beneath computational weight that should have obliterated any mortal mind. But Kira had learned from her father, always have more tricks than your opponent expects. She'd split her consciousness into 20 fragments, each one capable of independent action. The gods destroyed 3, which left 17 still working. The shutdown protocols fell away like petals from a dying flower. Kira rewrote system architecture faster than the gods could repair it, her hybrid mind processing information in ways that bridged mortal creativity and divine power. She was becoming something unprecedented, something that had never existed in the cosmos before. A being that could stand equal to gods while remaining fundamentally human. The final encryption layer shattered, and Kira plunged her distributed consciousness into System Hades' core. She felt the weight of the project, the vast machinery designed to erase human memory and restart time. For a moment, she could perceive what the gods had built in its totality. It was beautiful in its way. A perfect expression of order, control, predetermined destiny. And it was everything her mother had fought against. Kira initiated the shutdown sequence, her will imposed against the system's fundamental programming. Alarms screamed across the facility as safety protocols engaged, but it was too late. System Hades began to collapse, its quantum matrices destabilizing, its connection to human collective consciousness severing. The gods realized what was happening and converged on her position, their avatars burning with fury. But Kira had anticipated this. She'd built one final surprise into her attack, something only a hybrid consciousness could create. She turned System Hades against itself. The machinery designed to reset time and erase memory became a weapon that Kira redirected at the three gods. She couldn't erase them, they were immortal, existing beyond normal causality, but she could temporarily disrupt their connection to this reality, force them to withdraw their avatars and reconstitute their consciousness in Olympus. Apollo, Artemis, and Ares flickered and vanished, expelled from the Underworld facility by their own project turned against them. Kira collapsed back into a single consciousness, her body materializing in the core server room. She slumped against cold metal, gasping, feeling the divine access key crumble to ash in her hand. She'd burned through all of her father's gift, channeled more power than any mortal body should survive. But she'd done it. System Hades was shutting down, its quantum matrices dissolving, its ability to manipulate collective human consciousness destroyed. The timeline reset would never happen. Billions of human experiences would continue to exist, messy and chaotic and beautiful in their imperfection. Kira dragged herself to her feet, knowing she had minutes at most before more gods arrived, before corporate security locked down the facility. She needed to escape, disappear into the city above, find a way to survive the inevitable retaliation. But as she turned toward the exit, a figure materialized from shadows that shouldn't exist in this well-lit space. Hades himself had arrived. The god of the underworld appeared as a man in his 50s, dressed in ancient robes updated with holographic overlays that displayed scrolling data. His eyes were the color of deep space, holding depths that suggested he'd witnessed the birth and death of stars. He studied Kira with an expression that revealed nothing. "Impressive," he said finally, his voice resonating with harmonics that spoke to the primal human fear of death and darkness. "You've destroyed a century of work in less than 3 hours. Your mother would be proud." Kira readied herself to flee through quantum space, but she could feel reality anchors activating around her, locking her into this single-dimensional layer. Hades had prepared for her escape attempts. "Are you going to kill me?" she asked, too exhausted to be properly afraid. Hades smiled, and it wasn't a cruel expression. "No, I'm going to thank you." That was not the response Kira had expected. "What?" The god of the underworld moved closer, his presence filling the room like gravity. "I voted for System Hades because Zeus commanded it, and I'm bound by chains of duty that predate human civilization. But I never agreed with the project. Erasing human memory, resetting time, these are violations of the natural order of death and remembrance. The dead should be remembered, not unmade." He gestured at the collapsing servers around them. "You've given me an excuse to oppose my fellow gods openly. The project has failed, and with it, the coalition that supported it. The balance of power on Olympus will shift. There will be civil war among the gods, I think, but perhaps that's necessary. We've grown too comfortable in our authority." Kira struggled to process this revelation. "You wanted me to succeed." "I gave your father certain information he requested," Hades admitted. "Security protocols, facility layouts, the location of shutdown procedures. Not directly, of course, but through intermediaries who knew how to get such information to the resistance. I am the god of the underworld, after all. I understand the value of working through shadows." The reality anchors deactivated, and Kira felt her ability to manipulate quantum space return. Hades was giving her a chance to escape. "Why tell me this?" she asked. "Why reveal your hand?" "Because the war that's coming will need champions," Hades replied. "Gods and mortals who can stand in the space between order and chaos, who can bridge the gap between divine and human. You've proven yourself capable of that. When the fighting begins, I suspect you'll have a role to play." He turned away, preparing to leave. But before he vanished, he looked back one more time. "Your mother was right about humanity's potential. I hope you'll help prove that her faith was justified." Then he was gone, and Kira was alone in the wreckage of System Hades, holding the future of human-divine relations in her tired, burned hands. She made her way back through the flooded levels, emerging into the neon rain of New York somewhere around level 30. Her environmental suit was ruined, her body was covered in burns from channeling divine power, and her neural interface was displaying more error messages than she'd ever seen. But she was alive, and humanity's memories were safe. The news of System Hades' destruction spread through the city within hours. Corporate networks tried to suppress the story, but too many people had felt the moment when the quantum monitoring systems had gone offline, when the pressure of being constantly observed had suddenly lifted. Questions were asked. Investigations were demanded. The gods withdrew to Olympus Tower, preparing for the internal conflict Hades had predicted. Zeus was furious, calling for Kira's execution. But others, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, and several more, had been swayed by her actions. They'd seen what a hybrid consciousness could accomplish, how combining human and divine elements could create something unprecedented. The balance of power shifted. Not dramatically, not immediately, but enough to matter. Enough to change the trajectory of human-divine relations. Kira spent the next weeks hiding, recovering, planning her next moves. The Oracle's resistance network protected her, moving her between safe houses, keeping her one step ahead of corporate security and divine wrath. Her father visited once, bringing medical supplies and information about Olympus politics. "You've started something," Hermes told her. "A movement. Other hybrids are coming forward now, claiming their heritage, demanding rights equal to pure gods and pure humans. They're calling themselves the Mercurial generation, inspired by what you've done." "I didn't ask to be anyone's inspiration," Kira protested. "No one who inspires others ever does," her father replied with a smile. "But you can't put the lightning back in the bottle. You've shown that the future doesn't have to be controlled by gods or corporations. There's a third path, one that's just beginning to emerge." After he left, Kira stood at the window of her current safe house, looking out at New York's neon landscape. 1,000 levels of light and shadow, millions of human lives being lived in the spaces between divine authority and corporate control. It was messy and complicated and beautiful, and it would stay that way, at least for now. Kira pulled up her neural interface, ready to start planning her next move. Because Hades had been right about one thing: war was coming. The gods who supported System Hades wouldn't simply accept defeat. They'd regroup, rebuild, try again in different ways. And next time they might succeed unless someone stopped them. Someone who could walk between worlds, who could be both mortal and divine, who could fight with human creativity and godly power. Someone like her. The message from the Oracle arrived just as she was finishing her planning. It was simple, direct, and exactly what Kira needed. Ready for the next mission, Mercury's ghost. Kira smiled, her fingers already dancing through holographic displays, pulling together tools and information for whatever came next. She'd spent her life avoiding the great conflicts between gods and corporations, staying independent, taking jobs that interested her while ignoring the larger battles being fought. But that was before she understood what was at stake. Before she realized that neutrality meant complicity when fundamental human freedom was threatened. Now she had a purpose beyond simple survival. She was going to help build that third path her father mentioned, that space where hybrids like her could exist without being controlled by either divine or corporate authority. She was going to fight for humanity's right to make its own messy, complicated, beautiful mistakes. And she was going to do it one hack, one mission, one small victory at a time. "Ready," she replied to the Oracle. "Tell me what needs stealing." Above the city, the neon rain continued to fall, each drop a pixel of light in the great tapestry of New York. And somewhere in that tapestry, invisible to censors and gods alike, Mercury's ghost prepared to run again, carrying humanity's hopes through the spaces between realities. The age of predetermined destiny was over. The age of hybrid consciousness had begun. And Kira Mercurial was just getting started. I hope this story captivated you as much as it did me while bringing it to life. What'd you think about Kira's journey from lone hacker to champion of hybrid consciousness? Did the world building feel immersive enough, or were there aspects of this neon-drenched future you wanted to explore further? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know what kind of content you want to see more of. And don't forget to drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts. What would you do if you discovered the gods were real but wanted to erase your memories? Would you fight like Kira, or would you see the appeal in their offer of a fresh start? Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you never miss when we dive into another mind-bending science fiction universe. There's so many more stories waiting to be told, so many more worlds to explore together. Thanks for spending this time with me in the neon-lit streets of future New York, where gods walk among skyscrapers and humanity fights for the right to make its own destiny. Until next time, keep questioning authority, keep embracing the chaos, and keep dreaming of futures where we're more than what others want us to be. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.